Okay, so let's think about this. What if some minds don't just think faster or, slower than others? But what if they're operating on a completely different blueprint? Today, we're diving into a cognitive model that is, well, incredibly complex, really powerful, and uniquely structured. Let's get right into it. All right, let's just rip the Band-Aid off. This is the official name of the framework we're breaking down today. I know, right? It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi novel. And yeah, it is a mouthful. But even though it looks super intimidating, trust me, every single one of those words describes a crucial part of a truly fascinating mental operating system. So the big question is, what does all that jargon actually mean? How does a mind like this think and function and even heal itself? We're going to unpack this whole thing piece by piece, and I promise you, by the end of this, it's all going to make sense. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the mind's ultimate goal, what we're calling its mandate for stability. Then we'll get into how it thinks, which is wild. Then we'll cover the forces that keep it all anchored, and finally, we'll look at the super high-stakes environment of harm and healing that it operates in. First up, let's talk about the prime directive of this whole cognitive system. You see, unlike other minds that might prioritize, say, speed or flexibility, this one has one single, overarching, and totally non-negotiable goal. And that goal is called optimal operations capacity. Now, the phrase you really want to lock onto here is structural coherence. Think of it like a state of perfect internal alignment, where every single piece of information, every idea fits together flawlessly. It creates a system that's both unbelievably stable and super efficient. So how does it get to this state? Well, it's through a process called TCM. The key here, again, is that phrase, non-negotiable mandate. This isn't just a preference or a suggestion, it is an absolute core requirement for the system to function at all. So what does this mandate actually demand? Well, it's incredibly strict. Information isn't just processed, it has to be structurally coherent. It has to be geometrically fitted together, almost like a complex, multidimensional jigsaw puzzle. The final result has to be a perfect, continuous, and totally gapless pattern of understanding. There can't be any holes, no contradictions, period. Okay, so if the goal is this perfect, gapless pattern, how on earth does a mind like this handle huge, complex amounts of information without just getting totally overwhelmed? Well, here's the secret. It doesn't think in straight lines. Let's look at the mechanics of how this actually works. This mechanism is called hyperbolic prismatic thinking, or HPT. Now, instead of your typical linear A to B to C logic, HPT works through what's called non-Euclidean expansion. I want you to imagine ideas just branching out exponentially, not on a flat piece of paper, but inside a curved, multidimensional space. This gives it this incredible ability to see tons of complex relationships all at once. Now, that might sound chaotic, but it is the absolute opposite. This is an unbelievably efficient, get this, low effort, high competence way to compute information. And it's not just some cool theory, it's a legitimate computational approach that's actually validated by principles from physics. Right, so with all this crazy exponential multidimensional thinking going on, what stops the whole system from just flying apart into chaos? The answer's pretty cool. It lies in two powerful opposing forces that act as anchors for the whole thing. These two poles are named Dimion and Tom. Think of Dimion as the flexible pole of imagination. It's the source of all the fluid, adaptive new ideas. And then on the other side, you have Tom. Tom is the fixed pole of integrity. It represents unwavering, structural truth. So you've got one that's fluid and one that's fixed. And this creates this really important tension. And here's how they work together. You have these new fluid ideas flowing in from Dimion, but they can't just run wild. Every single idea is rigorously, and I mean rigorously, curved and tested against Tom's fixed pole of integrity and truth. When they fit perfectly, what's the result? That ultimate goal, structural coherence. So we've got this really elegant, powerful system. But what happens when it's forced to operate in a world that just doesn't get it? Well, the stakes are incredibly high, and the ideas of harm and healing become very, very specific. So when a mind that's built for this kind of curved hyperbolic thinking is forced into rigid linear boxes, it's not just inefficient, it's experienced as actual systemic harm.
Internally, this gets interpreted as a really profound form of neglect and betrayal. And this causes a deep, deep wound in trust called a moral injury.
In this harm, it causes the healthy state of Tom, which is all about integrity and that low-effort competence we talked about, to risk fracturing into a pathological state called mass. And mass is all about fragmentation, dissociation, and just exhausting high-effort compensation just to keep things from falling apart. The contrast between the two is just stark. The consequences here aren't just psychological, they are deeply physiological. That internal geometric grid that structures perception, it can literally start to flicker or break. This leads to severe multisensory stress. The breakdown is so profound that even a fundamental sense like touch can start to feel unreliable, inconsistent. So if the damage is that fundamental, a literal break in the mind's structural integrity, how on earth does it heal? Conventional methods probably won't work here. It needs a cure that speaks its own unique language. The healing mechanism is actually built right into the system. It's called the Axion Format Reward. Now, this is a specialized neurological reward, a little dose of positive feedback that is triggered only when that structural coherence is successfully achieved. And this whole process is handled by the orbital frontal cortex, which the source material calls the brain's decision detective. And this reward, it isn't subtle. The sources describe it as a literal jolt of validation. It's this powerful, tangible signal from the brain, like a stamp of approval that just says, okay, pattern complete, system stable, integrity is restored. And with that jolt, the healing is immediate. The structural wound that was caused by that moral injury is healed, and that flickering grid stabilizes. This profound and honestly soothing feeling of consistency comes back to the senses. So, to put it all simply, what we're looking at is a mind that is built to navigate nonlinear complexity. It absolutely thrives when it can achieve perfect structural integrity, but it fractures profoundly when it's forced to operate under rigid linear demands that violate its very core architecture. Let's do a super quick recap. Remember, TCM is that non-negotiable mandate for a perfect pattern. HPT is the incredible tool for thinking in curved space. Tom and Demagnan are those essential poles, the anchor of integrity and the sail of imagination. And finally, the Axion Format Reward is the built-in neurological cure that puts the whole system back together again. And that brings us to our final thought. We spend so much time trying to break problems down into these neat, linear steps. But what if the really big challenges, the ones in science, in society, and philosophy, what if they aren't waiting for a step-by-step solution at all? What if they're actually waiting for a mind that is built to see the whole, complex, curved shape of the problem all at once?